Hi, everyone. Thank you for making it out and over on this very rainy day. It's greatly appreciated. So my name is Melissa Jacart. I'm an assistant professor in the philosophy department here at the University of Cincinnati. I am also the curriculum and pedagogy director for the UC Center for Public Engagement with Science. I'm really excited to welcome you all to our panel today. It is the Careers in Public Engagement with Science panel. Now, as the audience, there are two possible ways you may have made your way here today. The first is by being a graduate student in my course. Our course is the UC Center for Public Engagement with Science's curriculum offerings. We offer a 3-credit graduate course that focuses specifically on public engagement with science. Our course explores how to not only conduct public engagement with science in theory, but also in practice. The course covers a variety of topics, including discussions about different types of public engagement with science, methods for working with community partners and the public, as well as what it looks like to have learner-centered or public-centered engagement efforts. Topics in our course include not only basics to science communication and public talks, but also how to have effective conversations and how to effectively communicate your research and work to broader audiences. Our course eventually culminates in all the students participating in their own public engagement with science effort. So the students in my course obviously know that this is what the course is all about, but for those of you who didn't make your way here today by our course, I wanted you to know that course exists. We offer it bi-yearly or every other year, but we also have ongoing curriculum offerings that are sort of 1-credit, bite-sized opportunities to learn some of the basics to public engagement in theory and practice. I will make a plug for this at the end as well, but if you're curious, we'll have a QR code and we'll also be able to follow up in some ways so that you can sign up for our newsletter and learn about these curricular offerings. So today's panel is part of our course. Part of what we do in the class is not only figure out how to do public engagement with science, but we try to learn about different career paths in public engagement with science. Obviously, academia is one path, but there's actually a wide variety of other paths, and that is why we're excited to have our panelists here today to help showcase some of this breadth. All right, so part of you may have come here from our course. The other half of you may have come here from the Grad College's Careers Week. This is an ongoing effort this week, and our course is really excited to have partnered with the Grad College to help showcase this panel. If you aren't already familiar with the Grad College's Career Week, it is a week-long professional development series designed to help graduate students explore and launch successful careers in industry, academia, and public sectors. And so I really want to thank the Grad College for their interest in partnering with Pew's, our center, to have this class as part of the offerings. If you want to see what other offerings the Grad College is offering, they also have some lovely swag and a QR code, and it's also a wonderful offering of programming. All right, so with the introductions and thanks for our hosts out of the way, we will turn to our main event, the panel discussion. Before I briefly introduce our speakers, I want to just let everyone know that we are recording today's session, and so that's just something to be mindful of. None of you will really appear on camera. If you ask a question later, we'll capture that on audio, but really, as you all can see in the back, that camera is pointed at all of us. All right, so with that, let me introduce our speakers. So first, let me introduce Brenda Hunda. Brenda Hunda is the curator of the Invertebrate Paleontology at the Cincinnati Museum Center. Her position includes exhibit design, educational programming development, community outreach in the form of lectures and workshops, curating the largest collection of Upper Ordovician. Oh, I practiced and then I got it wrong. Okay. Fossils in the world, as well as research. For those of you who don't know, this is something Brenda taught me. Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana are a particularly rich location for fossils in the United States. In terms of her academic background, she received her bachelor's in paleontology and master's in geology from the University of Alberta, Canada, and her PhD in geology from the University of California, Riverside. Our next speaker is Kate Schroder. All right. I've gotten myself nervous that I'm going to say these wrong now after practicing. She is the president and CEO of Interact for Health. Their mission is to ensure people in our region have a just opportunity to live their healthiest lives. Kate is a Cincinnati native and has experience leading health initiatives locally and internationally. In 2020, Kate was a candidate for Congress in Ohio's 1st District, running on a platform to expand access to affordable health care and economic mobility. In terms of her academic background, she holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Indiana University and a Master's of Business Administration from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Finally, we have Michelle Burbage, who is an Associate Professor Educator in the Department of Environmental and Public Health Sciences in the College of Medicine. She is also the director of the Masters for Public Health program and director of the Global Health Concentration in the College of Medicine. Her research is dedicated to improving the health and well-being of children, adolescents, minorities, and other vulnerable populations. In terms of her academic background, she received her PhD in health education from the University of Cincinnati with an emphasis in behavioral analysis. Her MS is in health education with an emphasis on community health. All right, so I've just offered a quick introduction to all of these fine folks, but what we've done to kick off the session today is we've asked each of these speakers to say maybe 5 to 10 minutes about their career trajectory, to give us their version, their story. I've given you the website version, but you're going to hear a little bit more about their journey in their career. Following each of them in turn, having their opportunity to tell you a bit more about their background, we're going to then open up the room for questions and answers. So as you're listening, if you have a question, be sure to jot it down. I'll open up the floor after we hear from everybody, and we'll take our discussion from there. All right, and so with that, I will turn it first to Brenda.
I'm a little toxic today, so I'm just going to do it this way. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a paleontologist, and I'm the kind of person that was that kid. Do you remember that kid? If you were not that kid, you knew that kid who knew every dinosaur name in preschool, right? Okay, I was that kid, right? Most of us tend to grow out of that phase into other things, and I did not. So I'm still kind of in that phase. Even though I don't work on dinosaurs exclusively or specifically, I still love to deal with, of course, all fossils. And so I have a lucky story because I knew exactly what I wanted to do since I was 3 years old. And I've never, ever changed that route. My mom would tell you that I had a 2-week period where I wanted to be a paleontologist ballerina. And I'm not sure how that would have worked out, but once I discovered that I had to dance in front of mirrors, I just decided paleontology was going to be what I was going to do. And so my whole education was gunning right for paleontology. And when I got to college, I enrolled at University of Alberta in an undergraduate honors program specializing in paleontology, the only program in the country. I was the first to graduate as a female from that program, from the entire school. And when I started my degrees, there was no women faculty anywhere in the biological or geological sciences faculty. And so that wasn't that long ago, to be honest with you. That was like the 90s, okay? It wasn't that long ago. I then did my master's degree and then moved to the United States to do my PhD. While I was doing my PhD, I was doing research in the Cincinnati area on local trilobites and local fossils, and had established a relationship in Cincinnati with amateur collectors as well as with the university and with the museum as a research associate. And when the position came up, I applied for it a full year before I graduated with my PhD, and they hired me a year before I graduated. So I had a job coming directly out of college. One of the things that I attribute to my success in that, of course, is relationships, developing relationships, being interested, offering, my help in areas that faculty might have needed in terms of paleontology, getting to know the community, so that when that opportunity did come up for me to have a job here, I was pretty much a shoo-in because everybody knew me already. So I've been at the Museum Center now for 22 years. It's my first real big girl job. And I absolutely love it. Every day is a fantastic day, and I think I have the best career because I get to meld my two favorite passions in life, which is research and public science education.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Kate, and I have such a different story than Brenda, because I would say my career path has been one of just exploration and discovery. So I grew up here in Cincinnati. I was one of 4 kids. Grew up in a family of all healthcare providers. That was kind of, we are a family of helpers, and you use life to just make a difference in the world in whatever small way you can. And I love the healthcare profession, but rather I did know at a young age, rather than sort of seeing one patient at a time, I wanted to think about like how do we solve health challenges at a bigger level, what we would call system challenges now. So I thought public policy, and I went to Indiana, politics, got my dream job, what I thought was my dream job out of college, working for Senator Evan Bayh from Indiana in Washington, D.C. Had to answer phones for 3 months, and then graduated to be a legislative correspondent, where you get to do research and write letters on healthcare issues. And that was in '99. And I thought quickly, oh my goodness, it takes 15 years to get a mediocre bill through Congress. I was very interested in healthcare reform. Like this cannot be my whole life, because I am motivated, I know this, by getting things done. And I love public service and public policy, but I also wanted to be able to make change happen faster. And so after 3 years in legislative politics, I decided to go get my MBA, because I wanted to be able to flip between the public and private sector. So I went to Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania. Then I ended up, and it was there that I spent a summer working in hospital administration. And I thought, I grew up with people in hospitals, and like, hospitals are amazing. They're about extending the boundaries of people's lives, and how can we, and our healthcare system has thousands of challenges. But I was intrigued by how do we make it work for patients and clinicians in those. So I then went into best practice research and consulting with hospitals around the country at this amazing company in DC called the Advisory Board Company. We would do best practice research for each position in the C-suite at hospitals, and I loved it. And I was not planning to look for a new job. I was happy to stay there. But I was out with my now husband, then boyfriend, John, and he'd gone to Master's in International Affairs, and somebody said, does anybody have an MBA in healthcare experience? The Clinton Foundation is hiring in Zambia. And he was like, you should meet my girlfriend. And so I talked to him, and it was fascinating to me, the mission. This is President Clinton after just to take a brief pause. Is anyone aware of the global health arm? It's called CHI, the Clinton Health Access Initiative. It was started President Clinton, personally, I mean, he says this in not so many words, felt like he didn't do as much during his administration on AIDS. President Bush actually did much more on AIDS globally during his administration. So Clinton decided he wanted to dedicate his foundation to this, and he'd become friends with Mandela, President Mandela in South Africa. And so he called Mandela after his administration and said, what can I do in the AIDS space to be most helpful? And President Mandela said the number one issue is the drugs, antiretrovirals, are available, but they are completely unaffordable to the people in our country. They were $10,000 per patient per year. And even though 90% of the patients in the world were in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, 90% of the sales of antiretrovirals were sold into North America, Brazil, and Europe. And the market, it was a low volume, high margin business selling the antiretrovirals. And so the theory of CHI, what President Clinton started, was like, it doesn't have to be this way. We understand pharma needs to make a profit. They put a lot into the R&D. But rather than being high margin, low volume, let's make it high volume, low margin. You still make a profit. And so they tried that with 10 countries to start. They pooled volumes. They aligned on the requirements. And with the first negotiation, they opened it to any pharma companies that want to sell into these markets. The price went from $10,000 per patient per year down to $1,500 per patient per year. And we would negotiate every 6 months. And it transformed and there were a lot of partners involved, and we worked through the ministries of health in these countries. But the time when I was joining, they wanted to apply that same approach to pediatric antiretrovirals. So they had to go from 10 countries to 35. And so they needed people to open these countries up. So I'm 29 years old, living my best life in DC, And I passed my resume out on a whim, and they're rapidly growing. They're like, I get offered a position to move to Zambia in Africa and open their office there, hire the local staff, and help give them access to these lower price drugs. And I had never even been to Africa. And I was very lucky. My parents were like, what are you doing? At first, they didn't even know what country I was going to. It was either Angola, Zimbabwe, or Zambia. And I just said yes, because I was like, this is an opportunity to show up to serve. I'm 29, I'm not married, I have the ability to go and do this. And I did, and it changed my life. I was there for 2 years in Zambia, and then I spent another 10 years with the organization based out of the US, managing our pediatric treatment programs globally. Was part of growing the organization from 65 people to 2,400. It was just a life-changing experience. And being able to see our country have a much broader perspective growing up here in Cincinnati. I ended up leaving that role in 2019. So halfway through that, moved back to Cincinnati in 2013 because I'd been on Zoom my entire time. It was used to be Skype before Zoom. Because after Zambia, with CHI, they didn't care where you lived. I was in a global role. We had a US office in Boston, but we were all remote. I managed a team globally. So I ended up moving back to Cincinnati in 2013 because it was way more affordable and to be around the people I love. I'd gone through my own personal experience with Hodgkin's lymphoma in my early 30s, and that was a trigger for me to move back to Cincinnati to be closer to family. So I was there and then left in 2019 to step down to run for office, actually. So after 12 years in global health, I absolutely loved it, but I worked with a lot of countries that are not stable democracies, and I feel very strongly about we need more people involved in our democracy, more low ego doers, and so I was a Democratic nominee for Congress here in Cincinnati in 2020. Not a great year to run when Trump is on the ballot, when you are in a competitive gerrymandered district. I lost that race. But I then became the vaccine coordinator for this region for a year. And then for the last 4 years, I have been the CEO at a local health philanthropy called Interact for Health that does a lot of work in the mental health space and in policy change and in our rural communities.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation. So my journey was kind of similar, where I was all over the place. I didn't know where I wanted to go, and a lot of things I kind of contribute to luck, being in the right place, right time, but also getting to know people, networking, and finding my own path in public engagement and public health. So if you asked 10-year-old me what I would be, according to a test they gave in elementary, I don't know if they still do this, but it was a test to kind of see what job career is best for you, I should be a farmer. Because I love animals, I love nature. So was that for you? Or?
Cow farmer.
Yeah, we're supposed to be farmers. And that sounded pretty good at the time. I love animals, I love nature. And so that should have been my trajectory according to that. So I am from Cincinnati. Coleraine Township is where I was born and raised. And it was a no-brainer coming to UC. I mean, in my family, it was like just a natural fit. And I didn't even think of going to other universities. It was like, you're going to go to UC someday? And I said, yes, I love Bearcats. And so when I entered UC, I was a biology major with a minor in psychology, thinking I would go to maybe medical school. Because I knew I wanted to help out communities. I just didn't know how. And so at 18, the only thing I thought of was medical school. I thought that was the only route for me to help others. So I was pre-med pursuing that, and then my senior year, I realized this is not a good fit for me. So I was going to be a dermatologist. I ended up shadowing a dermatologist, and I fainted. I thought, nope, this is definitely not the career path for me. I have to be awake when I see patients. And so I actually switched at that moment. I made my major in psychology and my minor biology. I knew I loved psychology. I love mental health and advocating for mental health. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll be a clinical psychologist. Before I even pursued that path, I met some wonderful faculty members as well as students in the health education program here at UC and CECH, also known sometimes as Teachers College. And I realized this is the path for me. I want to be a health educator. I want to work on mental health and policy and all this other stuff, but doing research and advocating for it and being in the community. And so I got my master's and PhD in health education here at UC. And it was the best choice I ever made. I loved my time at UC, especially my graduate school and getting my degrees here. So then after that, I got a fellowship at the National Academy of Medicine in Washington, D.C., where I worked on lots of different things pertaining to children, family, and youth health. And some of the projects I worked on were looking at mental health among refugee youth, and policies impacting that health, or policies that are not helping to provide adequate health care for this population. I also worked on things related to advocacy for autism spectrum disorder and a whole bunch of other things that were very near and dear to my heart, both for a personal level as well as work that I've already been working on that I was feeling strongly about. So then after that, I still did research. I was an adjunct. I did a whole bunch of stuff here and there in Cincinnati. And then in 2020, I started as assistant professor educator in the College of Medicine, which at first, that's a great time to start a new job. But also, the College of Medicine, I thought was so far away. When I was here on main campus, I never stepped foot over there. I thought it was too far. Who would go to that campus? So my first time stepping foot was actually as a faculty member. And I love that campus. If you haven't been to it, you should definitely check it out. It's a pretty nice campus. And so I started off teaching different classes related to public health for the Master of Public Health program. And then from there, I've done more stuff related to public health. I'm like was mentioned earlier, director of it. I do global health and lots of other stuff. So when I first was finding my path to where I am now, I did not think that I would be doing what we now call public engagement with science. I thought I would just be doing health-related stuff at the community level. That's what I thought I'd be working on, and while I still do that, I do a lot of public engagement with science. It's kind of a natural fit for my background, being a health educator, so a lot of the work I do is just a natural intersection of science, public health, policy, and community engagement of science with the public. And so some of my work that I do is with different centers. So I was part of the Center for Environmental Genetics, which is a P30 center, which now I'm part of a P20 center through NIHES, and NIH, so National Institute of Health and National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, where I am doing a lot of work in community engagement. So they have a community engagement core where we go out to the community and we do a lot of work to connect scientists to the community and researchers to the community, and making sure we have this bi-directional or multi-directional communication between our members and the communities we serve. So again, my trajectory has been all over the place, doing different topics. If you Google me and you see some of the research I've done things in nutrition, and like you name it, I've probably done work in it because I didn't know where I wanted to be. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But that's the fun of exploring these different topics. I love exploring new things. And the one thing that all the things I work on have in common is that public engagement with science. So that's the one thing I make sure I hold true to all my work, whether it's global health, community health, health education, environmental health, teaching my students. That is the one thing that centers all of the work I do, is making sure it's always very much immersed in community engagement and engaging the public with science.
All right. Thank you all for those wonderful introductions. Yes, of course. All right. So I'll open things up to questions momentarily, but our first question will be a question I'm posing to you all that's started to emerge from my graduate seminar. I think one of the things that we're doing in that space is we're trying to explore what it looks like to do this like the best. Public engagement with science, when it works, when it goes well, what are the best theories, the best practices. But as we know, that's not always how things go. So I'm wondering if you could help kick this Q&A part off by maybe sharing an experience about a challenge that you've had in doing public engagement with science, either your biggest challenge or maybe one that happens frequently, maybe what that challenge is, and if you have an answer to how to solve it or troubleshoot it, any sense for how you went about addressing that challenge. Anybody want to go first?
I'm happy to start. I don't have all the answers. I can share a little bit about, so has anybody in here even heard of Interact for Health? Okay, this is something. So we're a health foundation. We've existed for 27 years now. And we do grants and investments in the 20 counties around greater Cincinnati. And when I started 4 years ago, we were starting a new strategic plan. And so we went through the process of deciding what we'd focus on, and through tons of interviews with the community, with nonprofits, government partners. There was a real need around youth mental health and well-being. So we knew our problem, we wanted to focus on this. The question was how. And one of the first things I did was, we have a group of other funders like Greater Cincinnati Foundation, BI3, the Jewish Foundation, a number of groups in the area that give out grants. We came together and said, a number of them were wanting to focus on youth mental health. Rather than doing it together or separately, what if we pool our funds and do it together? We can probably achieve more. It will be more effective than just updating each other on what we're doing. We can reach more scale and hopefully more impact. And then at the core of that is agreeing on what we're going to do. And the first step of that is understanding the problem. What is the underlying drivers, and what are the most effective strategies to addressing that? And it is messy. So we had 13 foundations come together and pool their funds, and we invited all the nonprofits in the community that work with youth or serve youth to come to the table as well. And we also, the commitment was pooled funds, and the other commitment was centering youth voice and leadership in it. So one of our core beliefs at Interact is those closest to the problem are closest to solutions. And so a bunch of adults sitting around saying this is what we need to do is not going to be the answer. And so we're now in our third group of 25 youth fellows that work 20 hours a month leading and driving this effort. But a big challenge, we started with a 6-month assessment, and I will tell you, there were so many challenges throughout this. I mean, one of them was there is the enormity of it, right? There is a mindset, I think, among a lot of adults, and one of the first mindset shifts that we were working on is the problem is not the youth. The problem is the conditions in which people are growing up. And one of the first things that came out of the data when we met, there were tons of focus groups and surveys done and conversations, was what the youth were telling us was, yes, treatment is a problem, but that is not where we should focus. The much bigger problem is connection, belonging, safety, feeling like I have the ability to shape my future, what we call agency. And so that's been the focus of the whole effort. And that unveiled the next challenge, which is there's not data in the upstream metrics. We have a lot of data around depression, anxiety, mentally unhealthy days. There is not population level data in the space of what the youth were saying. I feel like I'm part of something that's bigger than me. I have the ability to shape my future. I am connected. I feel safe. I have a trusted adult that I can go to with any problem that I have. So these are some of the core metrics that our community was saying we want to work on, and yet there's no data that exists in this space. So interestingly, nationally, the Melinda Gates' foundation, Pivotal Ventures, for the first time in November of 24, put out national data on these upstream metrics. It's an amazing website, youthmentalhealthtracker.org. And we now have national baseline data on this. And we are partnering with that same group as a result of the youth's efforts and the focus here, because we have built this 10-year strategy out that is called Hopeful Empowered Youth, named by the youth. There's a website, there are 200 partners that are coming together monthly to work on safe spaces, safe adults, like more safe and trusted adults, and youth's lives, and to give youth more leadership opportunities in our community. So those are sort of the three areas that came out of the root cause analysis. But one of the big challenges is there's no silver bullet. It is a whole group of strategies that you're applying, but a huge challenge around how do we measure impact. And so Sergo, the group that worked with Pivotal Foundation and built their website, we are in the field now in the greater Cincinnati area. We're going to be the first region in the country that is measuring this data within a regional level at population scale. And we'll be able to compare it to national, and also we're building out statewide. And it is youth that designed the survey. They adapted the national one. And the youth are going to be a huge part of sharing the data locally and getting it out there. But we are learning. I will say with this effort, we are just learning all the time as we go. And it is like looking at the data, listening to those closest to it, and being open to just get curious.
First, that's awesome. I love hearing about that. My answer is kind of similar with building relationships. So when it comes to public engagement, a lot of misconception comes around with what does that mean? So the idea of, oh, we just give information to people. And let's just keep providing and feeding all these facts and data and information, and that's public engagement. But it goes way past that. All of you are going to be experts in whatever field you're pursuing. I heard lots of different things like healthcare, public health, policy, all the different things you're doing. It's fantastic, and you will be an expert in that. But it doesn't mean that community members and the public are going to listen to you. You have to build trust. So that's the biggest thing when it comes to public engagement, and that's the biggest battle or the biggest hurdle to overcome is how do you build trust? It's not something you build overnight. It's not something that can be done in a week. It takes a lot of time to build that trust, but it's very important. So my key thing I would say is, doing my work in public health, especially, so my thoughts are coming from a public health lens, an academic lens, and that is making sure that, you build that trust with communities. You're talking to them, you're listening to them, you're letting them lead the conversation, and you're providing input, based on those conversations you have with the community. So again, not going in and saying, I'm the expert, here's all the things that you should be doing, but going in and saying, hey, what do you want to talk about? So that's how a lot of my conversations start. It's just an informal talk with community members, leaders, NGOs, or nonprofit organizations, just to get a better handle of what are they hoping for, what are they seeking, and then how can I help empower them to meet their goals. So again, it's not just giving people the data or the facts, but also building that trust, building the communication, building relationships. That's the key, building a relationship with the communities you're serving.
Well, you guys gave me some really great jumping off points. Because I think for me so paleontology is one of these things that is a magnet for like a lot of people who are interested in that science and have opinions and thoughts about things. And a lot of that comes from social media. Now, I'm of a generation where social media is not my thing. I'm a Facebook failure. I don't tweet or X or know even what half this stuff is anymore. But I'm not saying it's all bad. What I find is that there's a particularly toxic combination of social media plus confirmation bias plus the lack of critical thinking that I see every day kind of in my job, where people want to talk to me and tell me about their opinions on things and what they think they know as fact, whether it's about evolution, biodiversity, climate change. All of these areas are my areas that I work with for the museum. And it's really hard when you're dealing with confirmation bias to really try to convince people by spitting out a bunch of facts that they're wrong. It does not work. In fact, all of the research that talks about spitting out facts to people, it just turns their brains right off. So that particular toxic element, that combination or equation is what I find to be a really big challenge in my area. And we do what I call the 5+1 R's. And you guys already talked about two of them. One of them you talked about is relationships. That's the +1 R. So if it is a relationship that you're establishing, like say the community with the museum center, the community with your organization, community members with individuals, that's really going to be powerful because we tend to listen with more open ears with people that we trust and can have a dialogue about why things may not be the actual case. The second thing on the R's is what I call reframing, which many organizations do this, and you talked about this. It's changing mindsets, but it's not going from these facts to my facts. It's more like this issue to your values. Right? So when you can bring values into the conversation, like you were talking about, what are your values? We want to protect, we want to share. Everyone has the same, we have those values and we share them, right? So building empathy in that way by sharing and talking about values. Climate change does this an awful lot when we talk about the values of protecting our Earth, that kind of stuff. People can get on board with that. So we talked about reframing and relationships. We also build in relevance. So what's happening to people in India because of climate change is not directly relevant to your lives. So we really want to make it relevant to what you're experiencing, so you feel that you have agency, which is also really important. We want to make it right here, another R, which is, how does it affect you living your life here right now? So climate change, for instance, is a huge, scary subject that is a global issue that most people get paralyzed and they just don't want to, they can't do anything. But if you can make it something about, well, here in Cincinnati, these are the things we're doing and here's how it can help, and you can be part of that in this place, which is your place, that's also very, very helpful. Making it real is another thing that we do a lot of times, which is in introducing things that engender empathy, like looking at how other people who are real people do it. That I'm a scientist and I'm a real person, right? Like I'm not just in a lab coat with glasses and like my physics high school teacher, who was awesome, by the way, but looked like Einstein. Just like perfect. No, like these are real people trying to solve real world problems, doing real things, that this is relevant and real. So we take all of those elements, I think, and we pull them together into how we transmit knowledge. We also use other ways of knowing, another very important thing to make things relatable. So we bring art and music into the discussions because they are not exclusionary from science. Some people relate to art more than they do to facts or to chemistry textbooks. If you can bring those kinds of pathways to knowledge that are outside of sort of the Western way of thinking about science and give people a way to connect, then that's another great way to try to combat the confirmation bias and to help engage in critical thinking.
Got it. All right, thank you all. So at this point, we have about 45 minutes. We're going to open it up to questions from all of you. So I will keep an eye out. I'll bring the mic over to whoever has a question so that we can all hear it well. But who would like to ask our first question? All right, 2 volunteers at the same time.
Thank you so much. I found that really interesting, and especially hearing about all of your different trajectories and how there was, for some, more uncertainty than others, and how you sort of navigated that. I guess what I'm wondering about is deciding, or maybe it's just that you just fell into this path, but between academia and not. And all of these other sort of paths that you can take. I think in graduate school, you sort of, I guess depending on the discipline, you either feel like you're being set up maybe to eventually become a professor or to go into policy or something else. And I think for a lot of people, there's a real choice point to make about, which you want to do. But as we've seen, you can engage with the public in either one, so that's kind of interesting. So I just wondered if any of you could speak to, if there was a choice where you had to decide academia or not, or if it was more just there were a lot of different kinds of choices in terms of, I got this internship here or that, which sounds like it was the story. So anyway, I guess that's the question.
I didn't want to attend faculty meetings. No. When I started out in this career path, there were really 3 directions that I could go in paleontology. It was academia, museums, or oil industry. Guess which one would make me a lot more money? I did not go that path. Yeah, right. That's because I thought academia was, at my time growing up in the 90s and doing my graduate work then, that was like the top-notch thing to strive for. So when I got my museum job, I actually was a little disappointed and thought, I'm only going to be here for a few years until I can, because I need a job, until I can actually get that academic position. I'll just publish, and well, we won't worry about the other things, and then the academic position will come along. And what I realized along the way was actually the museum world gave me the option to do so many things that I had really loved and not attend faculty meetings. So things like being able to do my research, you know, being able to do the public science education component, to be able to tell the stories that I wanted to tell through exhibits and programming. It just felt like, and doing things like this, you know. I teach, but I teach in a different kind of way. I mean, I taught college for a while. I did that for several years. I now teach a class through UC, but at the museum. So I get the best of all the world. So it just was something that I fell into and found out that it was the perfect thing for me.
So I still remember at my college graduation, one of my friends' dads said to us, in giving some advice, was like, make decisions that branch. And I don't know if this is fact checked or not, but he said the professions that have the highest suicide rates are house painters and dentists. And that's because in those professions are very narrow, and there's not a lot of other places you go there. Now, again, I'm passing on what was said. Not that this is a science-focused conversation, but that always stuck with me. And I did have an inflection point coming out with my MBA, an offer to go work inside the health system that I did my summer with, and also an offer to go to this firm in DC that did best practice research and consulting with 3,500 hospitals around the country. And that's what I chose because like I can always go in-house at a health system, but this will be an opportunity to get broader exposure. And one of the other things I've always thought about is really know what I'm good at and what I love to do. And I love problem solving. I love bringing different groups and sectors together to solve challenges that are bigger than any one sort of individual or organization, and how do we do that? And so for me, it was having this voice in the back of my head to think about like, what are decisions at branch that will set me up to expose me to different areas? And it doesn't just have to be in your profession. You could, in your free time, work on a government board, on a nonprofit board. There are ways to give yourself exposure and create branches that as you figure out more what you're good at and what you love to do, those opportunities open up.
So for me, my choice was around the time of my fellowship. So after I got my PhD, I was doing that fellowship in DC. And at the time, I thought I was going to definitely be academic. I thought I was going to be a faculty member, preferably at UC, and I thought this was going to be what I'm going to do. And the fellowship was really cool because the idea of the fellowship was to train people on policy, but also different health issues, and to see outside of an academic lens. So it's supposed to give people more experience so they can see you don't have to be faculty. You can go, into government and do, whatever it might be, other pathways for you. And I love that fellowship so much. But at the end, there were different job openings, not only with that organization, but also at different places in DC. And I had a choice to make. Do I go for one of these positions? I'm set up for it because now I've completed the fellowship. Or do I go back to Cincinnati and just keep trying to be a faculty member? I ended up choosing to keep trying to be a faculty member. And it took me a couple more years before I became faculty, but it was worth it. And why I did that was because of something my grandpa said years before that during my senior year of undergrad. So he passed away that year, but before he passed away, I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I already switched my degrees around. I knew I wasn't going to medical school now. To me, it felt like the end of the world was here because I didn't know where I was going. And he said, I don't have to live your life. You have to live it. So make sure it's something you enjoy. And I thought about that moment, and I thought, I don't think I'll enjoy doing this for life, but I will enjoy being a faculty member because I want to mentor students, I want to teach students, I want to work with the community that I was raised in, which is Cincinnati communities, and that was where my passion lied. So I ended up coming back here and making that choice to go into academia, and it's been the best choice. I've loved it, I still love it, and I always say, to my students are thinking about which way do I go, especially if they're PhD students, because I do mentor some PhD students, and typically when you're getting your PhD, you're being set up to be a faculty member most of the time. Not always, but a lot of the times. And I always tell them, you got to think about your own values, and what do you value And will your job be able to give that to you? So for me, I value mentorship because I had great mentors when I was a student, and I want to give that back to the next generation. And I also value education and helping people to, like we mentioned earlier, critically think and to work with communities and communicate their science. And so it was just a no-brainer for me, and that's why I decided to go into academics.
Hi. So being at an R1 institution, there is a lot of pressure for research, and sometimes it can be difficult working with faculty because they put so much emphasis on that research and not the engagement aspect. So I was wondering if you would be able to speak to why the engagement aspect has led to you being a better researcher or led to advances in your work.
So that's a great question. I'll say, and I'm not saying this is for UC, but all institutions, especially research institutions, community engaged work is not always a priority. So people say it's great, and public engagement, community engagement is fantastic, but faculty are oftentimes not promoted based on that. They don't get, promotions or salary increases or, be able to move up the chain because of that. So while it's great and people like it, you don't get rewarded at the job for that versus doing other types of research. So I do want to say that's a problem within the system of academia within the United States and probably around the world as well. But for me, I'm a little bit different than other faculty because I'm educator faculty. So my primary responsibility is teaching. I choose to do research because I love it, and I think research is important to make advances in the field. And I just do research I'm passionate about. So I get a little bit of flexibility because as long as I'm teaching, I kind of do whatever research I want. And my research is all about community engagement, health education, public engagement with science. So I'm able to pursue that. And for me, it's very beneficial because I think in public health, if you don't do that research, you're not moving forward in the field. Public health should be very much with the community at the forefront. They should be the center that makes everything move within public health. It should be the community that you are serving. So for me, it advances everything I do just because of the field I'm in. With that said, I work with a lot of colleagues in other disciplines at UC that love to work in community engagement and public engagement science as well, because even though they maybe are doing biology or in the communication department or they're in whatever department they're in, psychology, their work is still being benefited by doing community engaged work because, again, a lot of the work that's being done at UC and other places, while some of it is, wet labs or it's, doing AI or computer stuff behind the scenes, a lot of the research being done here has a human aspect to it. So it's impacting the lives of humans. And so if you're going to be impacting other people, then you should really have them as a part of your research.
That was great. I don't know that I have much to contribute it because I'm a big believer in doing research with as opposed to research to or for. I think, having that connection with the community and working with people, particularly in the health space, which is way more important than it is in the trilobite space. Although people do love trilobites. But some of the best research that I've done has been with community members who have questions and are interested, and I think that's really important. I do think that tenure track faculty and tenure packages should model what the National Science Foundation is doing, which is, I know, a different space, but is 50% research and 50% broader impacts. If the National Science Foundation and our granting agencies are evaluating your research on how it impacts your community, and that's 50% of whether or not you get that grant or not, then I think your tenure track package should evaluate that as well. I think there needs to be incentive for us to speak out as scientists in the community, and it needs to be at the university level, because I just know too many colleagues who don't do it because they don't get recognized and it doesn't go towards their tenure packages, right? And I think that's a real shame. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think those are great answers. It was interesting in the global health space because there are a lot of the organizations at CDC, it's prior, before everything, before the current environment, but CDC and a lot of universities that have global health programs, there's very strong incentives in the global health space that, if I'm being honest, were incredibly frustrating to me, that would only work on programs if it was going to be publishable, right? And so, for example, one of the treatment programs I worked on, diarrhea, #2 killer of kids globally. Zinc and oral rehydration salts cost less than 50 cents, available widely, but less than 5% of kids were getting them. So and like you have to dig into why this is, and we were working in a multitude of countries to increase this, but there was not a lot of interest from groups unless you were going to do like a randomized control study. Or the other crazy thing is like, okay, we know like it's not the price that's the barrier, it's that parents think the kid is fine because they get diarrhea all the time and it self-resolves. And so there needs to be some education, but like what education strategies? And a lot of groups would say, okay, well, we can't fund that because there isn't research that shows that this way of educating this group of moms in this village works. And it's like, oh my gosh, do you think Eli Lilly or Procter & Gamble goes and does randomized controlled trials when they get a new product out that is proven in the lab to be effective? No, this is operational research in the field. You track what happens for different interventions in different populations, and we learn as we go. And so I think that pressure to publish can be a real barrier sometimes in the public health space to not just try in implementation science. And so my question is just know what the question for me always was to the so what? Is the research question that we're trying to answer with this work going to be used in the field? And if it's not, I'm not going to do it. Because just because you can publish it, it's not worth all of everybody's time to get published if it's not going to actually be answering a question that's used in the field. Yeah.
That's interesting because I also think the pressure to publish and to have results doesn't allow for failure and doesn't allow for a lot of exploration as well. So doing science for the sake of science without having to have a definitive R-squared value at the end or something is really hard these days. Just to say, I want to go out and explore and see what I can discover, or I have this high-risk project and it may completely fail, but I need to try that, is also not happening in our spaces.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got 2 lined up.
Thank you guys for taking the time to speak with us and everything. So, kind of playing off that last question, what I'm hearing is, even outside of academia, the concept of getting funding for grants is key. But I know I've specifically run into this. Trying to tailor your research for grant funding is completely different from communicating with the public. And I was wondering what are your thoughts on how to translate these are my objectives for this grant and making it approachable to somebody that's not a grant reviewer? Because grant writing language is not English. It's something made up.
Who wants to go first? And you all don't have to answer. I should say that explicitly, but.
I know, it's a challenge for sure. I know NSF particularly, I think NIH might as well, do actually require you to provide a public synopsis of your research that they post online that is public level reading that can be helpful and can get your feet wet in terms of translating what can be really complicated big words into something that the public can approach. Do you guys have that experience with your funders as well? We also do that in the publication space as well. So the journals that I head up, we also have a non-technical abstract that we're required to provide to help translate that science in that science arena. For me, a lot of that experience of taking my science and putting it into the public space was experience. I don't know, do you guys have any other suggestions?
I would just add that I noticed in recent years there's more grants as well as journals that are requiring people to have that community engagement aspect to it, as well as how are you going to give this data back to the communities. I'm an editor for one journal that, one of the things they have to talk about is how are you going to give this data back to the community you're working with. And so again, I'm talking from a public health lens because I do health education work, but a lot of in recent years is looking at how are you incorporating communities and not just, what are you going to do for the community, but actually with the community being the leader and being the expert of their lived experience. So I do see a shift happening. Is it a great shift? I think it could be even greater, but I do see a lot of different outlets now starting to require that. Is it working? Okay.
The only other thing I would add, I think you raise an excellent point that research or government funding often is very different than other, I would say, community foundation or grant funding like that. Interact and other private foundations, community foundations, there's a whole movement around which I am 1,000% supportive of trust-based philanthropy, which is, I don't love the jargon of it, but essentially what it means is let's agree on what we're trying to do here. We're trying to answer this research question, working with this community, and we agree on sort of the end goal. But then you have all the flexibility. We're not requiring you to say how you're going to spend the money on what, because that will change as you learn and go. And so often not often, but there are cases where we're coming alongside a government grant or a research grant to provide that flexible funding that may not be feasible within a research grant. So I would just say, given whatever you're looking to have funded, if there is a private foundation, community foundation that might be willing to provide some flexible funding alongside of that, it gives you more ability to do the community work that you feel is needed.
I just also wanted to add, and I'm going to ask for Angela and your help in a minute here to remind me, there are also courses and internet resources you can use to translate your science to the public. We teach one at the Museum Center. What's it called again?
Sharing Science Experience. We partner with Brian on that.
Yeah, sharing Science Experience, yes. Have you heard of it? Have you?
Oh, I've taken it.
Okay. Well, that's great. Then you know how to do it. Great. Those are those kinds of resources available.
I'm also going to take Chair's prerogative because this question touches on something that I have some experience on. So between undergrad and grad school, I had a little identity crisis. I was going to be astrophysics, and I was like, I don't want to do this. What do I do with my life? And I was like, philosophy, that'll be nice. But I had no idea what I was doing applying to grad schools. And somehow, this resonates with something you said, Kate, on a whim, I decided to apply to the National Science Foundation. And I ended up getting a job as a science assistant. And one of my first jobs was to read the scientists' public statements about that they were trying to write for the public. And I was sort of the litmus test of if I couldn't understand it, I had to write to that senior faculty member and tell them that it wasn't written at an accessible level and point to them about what I didn't understand or what someone might not understand. And the amount of pushback that I got from senior folks about how that they've written it perfectly accessible. What on earth am I talking about? Was kind of astonishing. But that was my first job at NSF, was reading over those abstracts that you mentioned. But this is also partly behind what our graduate curriculum here at UC is trying to address. I mean, part of that challenge is it's not seen, how do you do that kind of community engaged work? In medical settings, it's becoming more of an important training component. How do you actually go and do that? How do we train our graduate students to do that kind of important work? But still, in a lot of the STEM disciplines, it's an afterthought. And so part of this class, as the students know, and those who are in the audience, you should take our class, but part of what we're trying to address is that gap. Grad students don't get explicit training in how to do public engagement with science. Nevertheless, NSF considers it a core evaluation component, that broader impacts. So, yeah. All right, Chin. We'll go 1, 2.
It's been a really huge pleasure to listen to the stories, and it's fascinating to hear all about like your experiences in pews. So it's like we've talked a lot about like the intrinsic value of doing public engagement with science, and I just like to throw a question about how do we like, or what should we do as like young adults to prepare ourselves to be able to get the instrumental value of doing public engagement with science as a career. So unpack this a little bit. I'm halfway through my PhD program, so I'm kind of set up for that narrow way of like academia, whatever. And I'm also interested in making branches to try to explore what can be out there apart from the academia pathway. But like, it's like to be realistic, you kind of have the sense that academia is pretty competitive and making branches is not easy because you have to put yourself out there, and that's kind of unsure like what you can get, and also like have to figure out in the real ground to build relationships. So it's like, I guess the question is like, how would you prepare yourself to make yourself to be that kind of person that can make the choices between different options? Because sometimes I'm just like have that panic sort of imagination that I'm going to be the one that's going to be picked up by other people. So I'm going to be chosen, not that like I'm able to choose. And so it's like, how, like, can you say anything about like your experiences with like you're trying or like you're not sure about what is going on, that kind of thing? Like how did you navigate that situation? Yeah.
Okay, I think, what a deep question. I think, and I don't know if this is going to get at your answer, but to me, it's almost like a specialist versus a generalist. And what are the trade-offs a little bit between, because when you're a specialist, you can become very expert in your area or in your field. And that may, and I'm not in academia, but it is one of the most competitive sectors. And so I can't weigh those trade-offs. I think what I know where I get motivated in life is the ability to like make change happen in the world, positive change happen in the world. And something that I have come to this in reflection and realizing one of the ways that I am able to be effective at doing that is because I have worked in different sectors. I have worked in government. I have worked in the private sector. I have worked in nonprofits. And I can code switch in my language to be able to connect. I think this is so important now in the world. It goes to what you're saying about building trust and building relationships. Being able to understand how people's minds work in academia, how people in government function, how the private sector functions. Yes, those branches take time to create, and they will take away for your ability to be an expert and move up in academia. But they will also, when you need those other groups or sectors to help you solve a challenge or something you're working on, you will be way more effective. And not everybody has to be that person, but I think what is the value that's come to me from working in different sectors is that I am able to make connections and persuade people to show up and help in ways that they did not think, because I have worked in these different sectors. And I don't think that's encouraged in our society today. Even at Interact for Health, like, almost all of my colleagues have only worked in nonprofit. And they see private sector, I mean, this was, when I ran for office, one anecdote, when I ran for office as a Democratic nominee, it was a red to blue district, a lot of money was coming in, and I was talking about the importance of being able to negotiate on prescription drugs at the federal level. I had spent my career in this, and my Democratic consultants were like, you can't say that, pharma, you gotta demonize pharma. I'm like, we need pharma at the table if we are going to solve this challenge. But there are a lot of incentives in our society today that want us to stay in our lanes and in our areas. And I think you have to decide that sort of for yourself, the value and the trade-offs. But I think to solve big problems in our society, it requires people that understand each other's sectors.
I just want to piggyback off that because that's exactly how I feel as well. Throughout my career, I have been in multiple different sectors, sometimes as a consultant, sometimes as a volunteer, sometimes when I was a student. So maybe it was through an internship or was a faculty member needed help with something. I helped them at a different site. So I've been in all different areas, whether it's government, whether it's nonprofit, academia, of course. And it just helped me grow as a faculty member, as an academic, as a researcher, as a community engaged specialist. So I would not trade that for anything in the world. I really love that I went to all different areas and dipped my toe in a lot of different areas of public health, whether it's due to topics or the actual sector of work. And it really helped me grow because I can better understand people's mindsets, where they're coming from, the language, as was just mentioned. It just helps me do a better job at what I do.
Thanks for amusing me. I also think, and they've both alluded to this in being a lot of different sectors, is thinking about yourself as a unique compilation of mad skills that can help you branch out, and that the skills that you might seek to do public science education are things that you have to go after. So it reminds me of, when I started my PhD, my advisor said to me, okay, Brenda, what is the weakest skill you have? Like, what is the thing that you are scared of the most? And I said, oh my God, talking in public. Giving presentations, I do not want to stand up and talk to people. And he made me do everything in public speaking he could possibly make me do. I was like, oh my gosh, right? But what it did was it took something that I knew I needed to work on as a skill that would help me get to any various places that I needed to go. And it forced me to work on it, right? So if you think about the fact that as scientists, we're not trained as public science educators. We're trained as academics. Okay, you have to go after those. You have to go after those skills, those what they call soft skills, which I think are the hardest skills. Right? Think about things like being an effective writer, being an effective public speaker, all those kinds of things. Being organized, all the things. If you need to bone up on your science writing, take a science communication class, maybe take a journalism class, something outside of perhaps your direct path that will help round out some of those skills for you so that when you graduate, you have a whole set of skills that can take you in any direction that possibly might be opened up to you. And I think those soft skills are things that I know a lot of CEOs and business people in the geological sciences are looking for. They're like, yeah, you come out with a degree in geology, I can teach you how to do seismic, but I can't teach you how to be a really great communicator, right? So you want to work on those things so that you have that toolkit for whatever direction you are going in.
And to that end, those who are in our course, one of the opportunities you have is to do one of our summer fellowships, and this is exactly to this point of providing graduate students with non-traditional sort of branches of like that little bit of exposure in a small bite over the summer, giving them that experience of working in private sector or in different kinds of spaces. And similarly, our Center for Public Engagement with Science, even if you're not in our class, we advertise a lot of positions like this. We have had positions with Michelman, a few other places that offer, again, these opportunities to do this kind of branching. All right, I saw one and then two in the back.
This has been really cool. I wish I knew this existed, this course, because I'm graduating in a month, so unfortunately I have to be funding. But I'm really, really interested in science diplomacy. I come from a very foundational chemistry background, but I got the incredible opportunity to be a Lindau visitor at the Nobel Laureate conference in Germany over the summer. And I was really inspired after talking to Peter Agri and people of that sort on science diplomacy. And like, while my direct science, although my skills, but my direct science doesn't really apply to like bringing community into like the health sector or even in climate change in the same sense, Some of the technologies definitely are marketed that way, especially for NSF, you know. But in general, it's like, I feel like most of you, or all three of you, have really paved a way for your own career path. And like, I'm finding, especially in a tight job market at the moment, I'm finding that a lot of places, either you want to fit a very rigid mold and then they want to build you up, or you have to kind of like form into and put your own kind of spin on a career. So like going like from private to public to nonprofit, or finding a place within academia that is still community-based and not ivory tower cut off. Like, I want to do that. I'm very international focused. I want to be part of those conversations, but it's not a clear-cut way to enter those conversations. So it seems like all three of you have kind of paved a way to find that career, and I'm kind of looking for, what would you suggest to someone looking for that to kind of get into? So, yeah. Sorry.
I got drafted. I don't have all the answers. I think that's hard. I think you, I would think about, first of all, give yourself grace. You don't have to have it all figured out now. Just figure out the next best thing, right? Figure out a role that is going to continue to develop your skills in an area that you're passionate about. And then when you're in there, you can figure out, like, I mean, if it has the culture matters at an organization, but if it has a culture, like, as long as you're adding value in the area that you're supposed to add value and you're hired to do, they're often, like, you find that as you do well, other things come to your plate, you will have more and more opportunities. And so I think if you're going somewhere where you have that opportunity to grow. I can share a quick example. So I was hired in Zambia to go open the office and implement their access to the pediatric antiretrovirals. They just negotiated lower price, and we had about $700,000 to support the Ministry of Health in scaling up their pediatric diagnostic system so they could test children, and then they were going to, and then they would be able to access these lower price drugs as well. I get there, I fly, I mean, it's crazy in retrospect, you know, flew 24 hours, land 6 a.m., my boss is there for 2 days, back-to-back meetings all day. She gets on a plane and leaves and is like, best of luck, these are all the people you need to know. Okay, like the fourth day, I'm sitting down with the Ministry of Health to be like, okay, so how can we help you? I need to figure out how much you could order of these pediatric antiretrovirals, how we can program this money. And Dr. Mwango's like, Kate, we would love to work on pediatric HIV. We do not have enough health workers to even deliver babies or offer vaccines. And this is my whole job. I have been hired here to implement this pediatric HIV program, and the head of their HIV program in the Ministry of Health is like, and we work with them through the Ministry of Health, like they're the deciders on this. So I'm like, okay. So I was like, okay, my job here is to add value. I am here, and they like talk about top-down philanthropy and challenges, right? So I'm like, how can I add value here? Like, yes, like Dr. Mwango, can you work with me on this? I hear you. We don't have funding on the health worker crisis, but let me figure it out, or let me see what I can do. And I start talking to everybody internally, talking about like, how do we do this? Okay, President Clinton comes to 3 countries once a year around Mandela's birthday. He goes to Mandela's birthday in July in South Africa, and I got to get Zambia on the list for him to come visit, because if President Clinton comes, there's a head of state meeting, and if this can be acknowledged in the head of state meeting, I will be able to have the doors open up to be able to try to fundraise for this. So no US president had been to Zambia at this point, and I am like laying on the road to all the reasons President Clinton needs to come to Zambia, and we get it on the schedule. He comes, I write the talking point, help with the talking points on both sides. For President Manawasa, President Clinton, we so appreciate your help on HIV. If there's any way you can help us on our health worker crisis, that would be amazing. President Clinton's ready to hear this. We don't have funding now, but we'll work on it. And it was that conversation that helped us to expand what we were working on, worked on a Global Fund grant, was able to raise $50 million through that, $10 million through Clinton Foundation. Like it really opened the doors. But like that was not what I was hired to do. I was hired on an HIV. So you just have that like add value, get in there. You know, if you are working hard to deliver on what you're expected to do and able to do more, opportunities come.
Yeah, and that's been a similar experience for me too. So, doing my job and meeting the mission, vision, and goals of the job. So wherever you go, there'll be mission, there'll be a vision statement, there'll be goals of that organization. Making sure that aligns with your own personal values is the first key. And then making sure you're doing the job that they are requiring you to do, and then from there, going above and beyond. So a lot of times I do take the extra step, even if it's not part of my job description, to make connections, to network, to try to create new programs, to try to do things that align with what I want to do, what I think is beneficial for my students, for the community, for whatever I'm doing, and just moving forward with it. And so usually, in my experience for me, as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and if I have extra time to add on to that, it's meeting the mission, like I said, and vision of that organization, it usually works out pretty good. So again, I would say networking, making sure the site that you're working at is appropriate for your own values and your beliefs and what you want to pursue, making sure there is some flexibility at that place. So will they allow you, even if you meet your bare minimums, can you go above and beyond? Is that allowed? If so, that sounds like a great place where you can thrive and carve out your own area that you want to pursue.
I would say that's perfect. That's amazing. I'd also say that establishing relationships. I'm not much of a stay in my own lane kind of gal. I do the work that I need to do, but then I cultivate opportunities for myself through establishing relationships. I consider myself somewhat of a positive deviant, meaning that I want to make positive change and support the mission of my organization, but I'm also not afraid to push the boundaries a little bit through established relationships to see how we can take things in different directions. And so as long as you are satisfying your job, but also are like, well, I see an opportunity or a hole that I need to fill because I have these skills or I want to do that, I say go for it.
Thank you for your discussion. I have two questions. The first is I would want you to share with us maybe a specific public engagement with science projects that you have undertaken and how you went about it, especially with building trust with community and avoiding the stating of facts, but rather allowing community members to talk, and also how did that project go and what was the end result? And the second question I would want to ask is just to continue the discussion we've been having, that if you're thinking of branching out of academia and into maybe something, into a role that allows you to do public engagement and all the skills that you have to develop, because obviously there are some skills that you are being taught in graduate school, even though they are more streamlined to academia, but I do think that some of these skills can be transferable. So if you could help us to explain, you could explain how some of the skills that you get in grad school can be transferable to these branches of public engagement and all, would be really helpful. Thank you.
That's a great question, lots in there. One of the ones that I am most proud of is developing an exhibit about the geology of the tri-state region called Ancient Worlds Hiding in Plain Sight. If you haven't been to the museum center and you want to see it, you should. Anyone seen it? Okay, good. Did you like it? Okay, great. Just no pressure, no pressure. You're on video, on camera right now. Because the geology of this area and the paleontology is a huge topic, we had to really decide how we were going to do it in such a way that we wanted people to see themselves in the science. That's really kind of key, right? We didn't want you to walk in and think, oh, I've got an expert paleontologist telling me what it is that I need to know. So one of the key tenets I always take is trying to find ways to make someone see themselves and what information it is that you are trying to present to them. And we did this in a variety of ways. First is that we included lots of pictures of people, regular people doing fossil collecting, everything from kids to grandparents, all ethnicities. So everyone can come in and find someone that they can say, I can relate to that person. Look at what they're doing. I can do it too, which is really important for kids particularly to see themselves in what it is that they're learning about and saying, hey, I have a role model. I have somebody that I can see. I'm doing that too. Another way that we chose to do it is through voice. And so voice is really important in exhibit programming and education development. And it's the voice at which you are speaking to the people in, and there's lots of ways, first person, third person, all the kind of stuff. But we really detracted in all of our galleries, really, but specifically in this one, from doing the scientist authoritarian voice of, here's what you need to know. It was really more of, here's some kind of fun things, what do you think, right? A very approachable layman's type language, not an all in a front where you feel like you're going to have a quiz at the end of the experience. So the voice was really important in the tone of that voice. And that was something that we actually talked about for a really long time. How do you set the right tone going in? Because you don't want to put people off. We also used a lot of other ways of knowing. So we invited Native American groups to give us their perspective on fossils in the area because they were here long before Europeans were, and they had were experiencing the fossils long before, and invited them to tell us stories about that, and we put that in the gallery. So that's another way of knowing. We also used a lot of art in the gallery to not only soften the hard edges of science, but also to give people another way to connect and create empathy with the topic. So I think those are some of the ways in which we tried to make connections with the people and have people see themselves in what they were witnessing and saying, hey, you know what, I can do this too. And that was really like one of the most important goals that we had. I think it worked out great.
Maybe we have about 3-4 minutes left. I know one of the things that was in Dami's question that might be especially nice for you two to touch on is that aspect of trust.
Yeah, so one example for me is that I used to host science cafes as part of the P30 Center when I was doing the community engagement core. I was the co-leader for that. We're now doing something similar for the new community engagement core for the P20 Center, which is called Climate Cafes. And so what this is informal conversations in a community place. So this could be a pub, a library, wherever the community feels at ease. And they can come with, questions about a certain topic. And then we have an expert there to answer. So one example is we had an expert in lead host one years ago and talk about lead in paint in homes. And, what do you do if you have that? And what are some resources? And what does this mean for the health of your child who maybe ate lead paint? And where can you go for help? This was a wonderful way to engage with the community because first we worked with community partners. So this would be like organizations in the community, so like nonprofits, sometimes health departments, whoever might be in the community that can help us and say, hey, we have this issue, do you mind coming out? A lot of community members have expressed interest in learning about it. So we let the community kind of tell us what they want, and then we go to that area that they're comfortable meeting us, so like a pub or something. And it was really great. So the skill, though, was really building that trust with the community. So we had that kind of built in because we were working with a community organization that already had trust with the community. So that was pretty easy. So I'd say the first thing to do if you're starting off is find community organizations or partners or community leaders that already have that trust and start to get to know them and work with them because they have that built-in trust and they can help you access that community or that community access you in a safe way. So that's probably the easiest way to go about building trust when you're first starting off. And I still do that. I often work with community partners because they know the communities they're serving. And the other thing is, just as mentioned before with my colleagues up here, but making sure that you are not coming in as the know-it-all expert, but you're coming in from a place that's truly from a place of caring, of wanting to work with people, wanting to help out, but letting them take the lead. So be very transparent in what you know or don't know. Let them lead conversations. And if you don't know something, you could find others to help, so don't pretend you know things. I've seen that happen sometimes with some of colleagues in the past where they might go in and pretend they know things that they don't know. If you don't know, that's fine. Let the community members know that and have someone else go in and talk to them. So just be very open, honest, and just work with the communities.
Maybe just to zoom out for 1 minute, I want to talk about a project that has really influenced my thinking. It's not our project, but in California, starting in 2010, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, the California Endowment Fund and KFF, Kaiser Family Foundation, did a Building Healthy Communities investment, where they were looking across they looked across the entire state, what are 10 communities that have some of the lowest lifespan, and we are going to pour in, they committed, it ended up being $1.4 billion into these 10 communities over 10 years to see what makes a healthy community, and they were going to study it from the jump. They started pouring money in, all sorts of different efforts. They stopped in 2015 and said, pause. There is one thing that makes a difference more than anything else in these communities. Any guesses? It was the agency, the voice, and the civic participation of the community. So the communities where the community itself was leading and driving the change were off the charts ahead. And so the interventions going forward going after that became much more about how do we get behind, exactly as you were both sharing, how do we get behind the community, build their leadership, empower them, and there's this one of our sort of pillars of our place-based work at Interact is called community power. It really is, and it is hard because you have to set the container. It's the skills that you are learning now about how do you build relationships, build trust, go to their community, let them lead. And there's like that ladder of community power from just offering input to actually like leading and driving the change and having agency, and how do you show up in support of that. So I think that frames both for me personally and as an organization, like how do we show up in an authentic, intentional way to truly achieve that? Because that's the change that lasts. It's not somebody coming in and doing something for you or even alongside you. It's helping you to drive it yourself. And as a parent, I am constantly reminding myself of this and trying to do that as well.
I'm going to let Michelle have last word.
I'm just going to add one quick thing to that. Just remember your students. So there's plenty of faculty members that are already doing community engaged work, and you can be trained by them. So I know I have a lot of projects. I know Pews has a lot of faculty that are doing different projects. Your mentors might be doing projects. That's how I learned. It wasn't going off on my own trying to do something. It was being mentor trained and seeing how it's already being done, and then getting that toolbox that was mentioned earlier, and then going off after I graduated to start doing my own work. But even the first 3 years after graduation, I still would contact my mentor and say, hey, can you just help me brainstorm this or look over my proposal? So you're not alone. You're at UC. You have wonderful faculty all around you. Definitely tap into that.
No, that's perfect. And to that end, here's the poster that I promised I would display at the end. So this is our training sequence here, bearing the 1 credit, 3 credit, or summer fellowship. If you are not already on UC Pew's email listserv, there's a QR code at the bottom. Sign up. We will send you opportunities to get involved, to continue your own public engagement with Science Journey. And to that end, as the last note, let's thank our wonderful panelists again. Thank you so much.